Retired Marine Sergeant Dylan Cross sat on his wooden porch, staring at the orange sky over the Montana mountains. His coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but he didn't care. The doctor said he had maybe 3 days left. For if he was lucky. The cancer had spread too far, eaten through too much. No more treatments. No more hope. Just waiting. He'd sent everyone away 2 days ago. His neighbors wanted to stay. The folks from the VA hospital offered hospice care. Even his old squad mate Travis had driven up from Denver, but Dylan told him to go home. After 40 years in the Marines, after 23 campaigns on 12 different worlds, after watching friends die in his arms on planets whose names most people couldn't pronounce, Dylan figured he'd earned the right to die alone. Quiet. On his own terms. The sun was almost gone when he heard it. A deep rumble that made the coffee cup rattle against the porch railing. Dylan's first thought was earthquake, but Montana didn't get earthquakes like this. The rumble grew louder, deeper, vibrating in his chest like a bass drum. Then the trees started bending. 4 massive shapes dropped through the clouds. Dylan's heart seized. Even dying, even weak, his combat instincts kicked in hard. His hand shot to his hip where his sidearm used to be before he remembered he'd stopped carrying it 3 years ago. Dragons. Real, actual dragons. Not the fantasy kind from old Earth stories, but Drakari. The alien species humanity had fought for an entire generation. The war had ended 15 years ago, but seeing them still made Dylan's blood run cold. These were young ones though. He could tell by their size and the awkward way they flew. No weapons. No armor. Just 4 scared-looking dragon kids descending into his front yard like they were landing at the wrong birthday party. The biggest one landed first and immediately crushed his mailbox under one massive claw. The dragon winced. Sorry. Still learning Earth gravity. Dylan stood up slowly, every muscle tense. What do you want? The dragon shifted nervously. Are you Sergeant Dylan Cross? 3rd Marine Division, Proxima Campaign. Who's asking? My name is Brennan. These are my siblings. Morgan, Casey, and River. Our mother's name was Rachel. The dragon's voice was rough, like rocks grinding together, but the English was careful, practiced. She told us to find you. She said to tell you she's sorry we're late. Dylan felt his legs go weak. He sat back down hard in his chair. I don't know any Rachel. The smallest dragon, the one called River, crept forward on delicate claws. The kid couldn't have been more than 10 years old in dragon years. Mama said you would say that. She said the war made humans forget. Too much pain makes the brain hide memories. But you saved her life. In the dark place where everything was falling down. A memory hit Dylan like a punch to the gut. Proxima. The 3rd year of the war. His squad was doing cleanup after a brutal firefight in an abandoned mining facility. The ceiling had collapsed during the battle. They were checking for survivors when Dylan heard something. A whimper. A hiss of pain. He'd found her wedged between 2 concrete slabs. A Drakari scout. Young. One wing completely shattered, bent at angles that made Dylan's stomach turn just looking at it. Her eyes were wide with terror and pain. Every instinct, every bit of his training, every order from command said to put a bullet in her head and move on. The Drakari were the enemy. They'd killed thousands of humans. They'd bombed colonies. They'd shown no mercy. But Dylan saw something in those eyes. Not a monster. Not an alien killing machine. Just a scared kid who was hurting. He'd used his medkit. Splintered that broken wing as best he could with his limited supplies. Shared his water. His ration bar. When the extraction shuttle came 30 minutes later, he'd radioed that the sector was clear. Let her go. Never told anyone. His squad leader would have court-martialed him if he'd known. She lived. Dylan's voice came out as a whisper. Brennan nodded slowly. She lived. It took 2 years for her wing to heal properly. She couldn't fly missions anymore, so they transferred her to intelligence. When the war ended, she became a teacher. She raised us. The 4 of us. And every year on the anniversary of that day, she told us the story of the human Marine who chose mercy when he could have chosen hate. Dylan felt tears burning his eyes. He'd carried so much guilt from that war. So many faces of people he'd killed. Orders he'd followed. Cities he'd helped destroy. And here were 4 kids telling him that the one moment he'd broken the rules, the one time he'd followed his conscience instead of his orders, had actually mattered. Why are you here? He asked. Morgan, the 2nd largest, spoke up. Mama got sick 6 months ago. The same kind of sick you have. The inside kind that doctors can't fix. She tried to find you for years after the war, but the military records were sealed. By the time she finally tracked you down, she was too weak to travel. Casey continued the story. She made us promise. Made us swear on our fire and our wings that we would find you before your time ended. She said she owed you a debt. In our culture, a life saved creates a bond that never breaks. You gave her a future. You gave her the chance to have us. River moved even closer now, those big dragon eyes looking up at Dylan with something that looked like hope. Mama said you would try to send us away. She said humans always think they have to be strong and alone. But she taught us that nobody should end alone. You made sure she didn't die alone in that collapsed building. Now we make sure you don't die alone in this place. Dylan wiped his eyes roughly. Kid, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I made my peace with this. I chose to be alone. Did you choose? Brennan asked quietly. Or did you just think that's what you deserved? The question hit too close to home. Dylan looked at these four impossible visitors. Children of an enemy soldier he'd saved on a random Tuesday 15 years ago. A moment of kindness he'd completely forgotten until now. What exactly did your mother send you here to do? River's eyes brightened. To give you what Mama got. You gave her hope when she had none. You gave her a reason to believe in tomorrow. Now we give that back to you. Brennan spread his wings slightly. And when the time comes, we're going to take you flying. One last time. So you can see the world the way Mama saw it after you saved her. From above. Where everything looks different. Where you can finally understand what your kindness actually meant. Dylan looked at the four young dragons standing in his yard. At the crushed mailbox. At the setting sun. At the impossible gift that had just fallen out of the sky. For the first time in 3 days, Dylan Cross smiled. All right, he said softly. All right. You can stay. The next morning, Dylan woke up to the smell of something burning. Not a dangerous fire, but something sweet and woody, like incense mixed with pine sap. He stumbled out of his bedroom, expecting to find his kitchen in flames. Instead, he found 4 dragons crammed into his living room, carefully arranging small glowing plants around the furniture. What in the hell are you doing? Dylan asked, rubbing sleep from his eyes. River looked up, guilt written all over the young dragon's face. Sorry. We tried to be quiet. Mama said humans need lots of sleep when they are sick. Brennan was on a stepladder, which looked ridiculous given that dragons didn't really fit on human furniture. He was hanging something that looked like a cross between a flower and a firefly from Dylan's ceiling fan. These are memory flames. Part of our ritual. They help us remember the important things while we prepare. Prepare for what? For helping you cross over when the time comes, Morgan said matter-of-factly, arranging another glowing plant on the bookshelf. In our culture, death isn't something you hide from or face alone. It's a journey, and family walks with you as far as they can. Dylan sat down heavily on his couch. Casey immediately moved a plant so he wouldn't crush it. I'm not your family, kid. Yes, you are, River said simply. You saved Mama. That makes you pack. That makes you ours. Over breakfast, which turned out to be surprisingly decent scrambled eggs cooked by Morgan, Dylan learned more about Rachel. The dragon mother he'd saved and then completely forgotten. Brennan pulled out a battered photo album from a backpack that looked comically small against his dragon bulk. Mama kept this. She called it her proof that goodness exists book. The first photo showed Rachel, older and scarred, surrounded by 4 tiny hatchlings. Even in the picture, Dylan could see the damaged wing, healed but never quite right. The dragon in the photo looked peaceful though. Happy. After the war ended, she couldn't fly combat anymore, Casey explained, pointing at the wing in the picture. But she didn't want to anyway. She said she'd seen enough fighting. So she became a history teacher at the integration school. The first school where human and Drakari kids learned together. She taught them about the war. Dylan asked. She taught them about hate, River corrected. And about the choice to be different. Every year, on the first day of class, she told them about you. About the human soldier who saw her as a person when his entire world told him to see her as a monster. Dylan turned the pages slowly. More photos. Rachel with students, both human and dragon kids. Rachel at some kind of ceremony, receiving an award. Rachel teaching a class, pointing at a star map. She spent 3 years looking for you after the war, Brennan said quietly. Military records were classified. She wrote letters to the Marine Corps, to veterans organizations, to anyone who might know. But the human who saved a Drakari scout near Site 7 on Proxima wasn't much to go on. Morgan picked up the story. By the time she finally found someone who could access the sealed records, by the time she got your name and location, she was already sick. Stage 4. The doctors said she had maybe a year. She wanted to come herself, Casey added. Bought a ticket to Earth. Had her bags packed. But 2 days before the flight, she collapsed. The cancer had spread to her lungs. She couldn't breathe well enough to survive the altitude in a spacecraft. River's eyes were wet. She cried. Mama never cried, but she cried that day. She said she'd failed her on a debt. That she'd let you down. That's when she called us together, Brennan continued. We were all living in different places by then. I was studying engineering on New Seoul Station. Morgan was working as a paramedic on Titan Colony. Casey was in law school. River was still finishing basic education. Mama made us all come home. Dylan's hands trembled slightly as he turned another page. There was a photo of Rachel, clearly sick, surrounded by her 4 grown children. She was smaller, thinner, but her eyes were fierce. She made us swear, Morgan said. Made us put our claws together and take the old oath. That we would find you. That we would tell you what your kindness meant. That we would make sure you didn't end alone like she almost did in that collapsed building. What happened to her? Dylan asked softly. She died 4 months ago, River whispered. We were all there. All 4 of us, holding her, singing the old songs. At the end, she was happy. She said she'd lived a good life, raised good children, and that her only regret was not getting to thank you in person. Dylan had to set the album down. His vision was blurring. I didn't do anything special. I saw her hurting and I couldn't walk away. That's what Mama said you'd say, Casey smiled slightly. She told us you'd think it was nothing. But do you want to know what she did after you saved her? Dylan nodded, not trusting his voice. Brennan pulled out another folder. After she healed, after the war ended, Mema became one of the first peace negotiators. She worked on the Treaty of New Harmony. She helped write the integration policies that let our species live together. She personally sponsored 17 human families who wanted to relocate to Drakari worlds, and 23 Drakari families who wanted to come to Earth. Morgan continued. She testified before the Galactic Council about war crimes, but also about mercy. She told them that peace was possible because she had proof. A human marine had shown her kindness when he had every reason to show hate. 3 different colony treaties exist because of her work, Casey added. The Joint Disaster Response Protocol that saved 6,000 lives during the Kepler Station fire. The Shared Medical Research Initiative that's found cures for 4 different diseases. The Cultural Exchange Program that's given hundreds of thousands of humans and Drakari a chance to understand each other. River moved closer to Dylan. Mama did all of that because you gave her a future. You gave her hope. You showed her that maybe, just maybe, we didn't have to be enemies forever. Dylan looked at these 4 young dragons, at the glowing plants filling his cabin with soft light, at the photo album full of a life he'd never known he'd saved. She built all that, because I splintered her wing. No, Brennan said gently. She built all that because you saw her. Really saw her. In that moment, when you could have ended her, you chose to see another living being in pain. You chose compassion over orders. You chose hope over hate. And Mama spent the rest of her life proving that choice was the right one. The memory flames pulsed softly, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Dylan understood now why they were called memory flames. They weren't just plants. They were a reminder that every moment mattered, that every choice rippled outward in ways you'd never see. Your mother sounds like she was an amazing person, Dylan said finally. River curled up near his feet. She was. And she said you were too. She said humans like you were the reason peace was possible. Because you chose to be better than the war wanted you to be. Dylan sat there, surrounded by the children of a life he'd saved without knowing, and for the first time since his diagnosis, he didn't feel like dying alone was what he deserved. Maybe, just maybe, his life had mattered more than he'd ever realized. Dylan was trying to fix his crushed mailbox when the first car pulled up. A sleek diplomatic vehicle with Centauri government plates. He straightened up, confused, as a woman in an expensive suit stepped out. Sergeant Cross, she called out, walking toward him with purpose. Dylan squinted. Something about her face was familiar. Do I know you? Ambassador Natalie Brooks. Though last time we met, I was just a junior diplomat, and you were tackling me behind a concrete barrier while someone shot at my head. The memory clicked. New Harmony Station. The treaty negotiations. Some radical group opposed to peace had tried to assassinate the diplomatic team. Dylan's squad had been on security detail. He'd seen the gunman a split second before the shot and had simply reacted, grabbing the young woman and pulling her down. The bullet had missed her by inches. That was 20 years ago, Dylan said, stunned. How did you find me? Natalie smiled. Rachel sent word before she died. She'd been tracking down everyone you'd ever helped. Made a list. Sent messages. Said there was a stubborn Marine in Montana who needed to understand that his life mattered. She glanced at the 4 dragons lounging in the yard. I see her children beat me here. Before Dylan could respond, another vehicle appeared. Then another. A beat-up pickup truck. A rented van. A hydrogen transport with Titan colony markings. By noon, Dylan's isolated mountain cabin looked like a parking lot. The Peterson family arrived in a convoy of 3 vehicles. The grandmother, Ruth, was tiny and ancient, walking with a cane. But her eyes were sharp as she approached Dylan. You don't remember me, she said. I was 9 years old. Kepler Station evacuation. You carried me to the transport ship while the station was literally exploding around us. Dylan's mind reeled back. The Siege of Kepler. One of the worst battles of the war. Civilians trapped in the crossfire. His squad had been ordered to hold the line, but Dylan had seen the families huddled in the HAB modules. He'd made 3 trips back into the combat zone, carrying kids when he should have been fighting. You were the little girl with the stuffed rabbit, Dylan said, the memory surfacing. You wouldn't let go of it. Ruth laughed, tears in her eyes. Still have that rabbit. My granddaughter sleeps with it now. She gestured to the crowd behind her. This is my son Derek, his wife Linda, and their 4 kids. 17 people in our family now. All because you didn't leave me behind. A Drakari landed next, older than Brennan and his siblings, with military bearing. He approached Dylan and gave a formal bow. Commander Thane. Drakari Defense Force, retired. You spared my life during the Battle of Proxima Ridge. Dylan stared. I don't remember that. You wouldn't. There were hundreds of combat encounters that day. I ejected from my fighter after you shot me down. I was floating in the debris field, helpless. You flew past me in your pursuit craft. I waited for the kill shot. Thane's voice was quiet. It never came. You just flew past. Left me alive. I was out of ammunition, Dylan said honestly. Wasn't mercy. Just couldn't shoot you. The reason doesn't matter, Thane replied. The choice does. I lived. I went home. I became a flight instructor. I trained the first Joint Human Drakari Squadron. 200 pilots have graduated from my program. They patrol the border zones, keeping peace between our worlds. That all started because you didn't find more ammunition. More people kept arriving. A Trell merchant named Voss who Dylan had protected from raiders during a supply run. A former Marine named Jackson who Dylan had pulled from a burning dropship. A doctor named Patricia who'd been a field medic Dylan had covered while she treated wounded civilians under fire. Each one had a story. Each one had built a life that branched out, touched others, created ripples Dylan had never seen. By evening, there were 4 to 7 people crammed into and around Dylan's small cabin. Humans, Drakari, Centauri, Trell. Species that had been enemies mixing like old friends. Kids running around the yard playing some hybrid game that mixed human tag with Drakari flight challenges. Brennan had taken over the kitchen, somehow coordinating a meal that could feed everyone. Morgan was translating between groups. Casey was teaching human kids basic Drakari phrases. River was curled up with Ruth's great-grandchildren, telling them stories about Rachel. Dylan sat on his porch, overwhelmed, watching this impossible gathering. Natalie sat down next to him. Rachel was right about you. You had no idea, did you? No idea about what? That you changed the world. She gestured at the crowd. I negotiated 4 major peace treaties, Dylan. 4. Billions of people live in stability because of those agreements. And I only lived to negotiate them because you knocked me out of the way of a bullet. She paused. Do you know what I tell young diplomats when they ask me why I believe peace is possible? Dylan shook his head. I tell them about a Marine who didn't hesitate. Who saw a threat and reacted, not because I was important, but because I was a person in danger. I tell them that if a soldier trained to fight can still choose to protect, then peace isn't naive. It's possible. Jackson, the Marine Dylan had saved, joined them. I trained 200 new Marines after I recovered from my injuries. I taught them what you taught me that day in the burning dropship. That we don't leave people behind. That every life matters. 43 of my trainees went on to become officers. They're out there right now, leading with the values you showed me. Dr. Patricia added her voice from the doorway. I run a trauma hospital now on New Seattle Station. 600 beds. We treat everyone, regardless of species, politics, or ability to pay. I built that philosophy from watching you stand over me while I worked on wounded Drakari civilians. You didn't ask if they were enemy or ally. You just made sure I could save them. Ruth tapped her cane on the porch. My son Derek is a teacher. He teaches integration classes, human and alien kids together. He got that idea from me, and I got it from you. You showed a 9-year-old girl that in the middle of horror, people still choose kindness. That lesson shaped how I raised my family. Thane approached, his wings folded respectfully. The pilots I trained have prevented 17 border conflicts through quick response and de-escalation. They're not warriors anymore. They're peacekeepers. They learned from me, and I learned from the human who chose not to kill when he had the chance. Dylan felt like he couldn't breathe. I was just doing my job. Just trying to be decent. Exactly, River said, appearing at his elbow. That's what Mama wanted you to understand. You thought you were just being decent. Just doing the right thing in the moment. But those moments added up. They grew. They became forests. Brennan brought out food, somehow managing to balance plates with his massive claws. Mama used to say that humans don't realize their power. You think you have to do big things to matter. Save the world in one dramatic moment. But she said the real power is in the small choices. The everyday decisions to see people instead of categories. To choose compassion when hate is easier. The gathering turned into an impromptu celebration. People shared food, stories, music. A human teenager played guitar while a young Drakari provided percussion with rhythmic wing beats. Children from 3 different species invented games together. Former enemies shared drinks and laughed about misunderstandings during the war. Dylan watched it all, tears streaming down his face. I thought I was nobody, he whispered to Natalie. Just a grunt who followed orders and tried not to die. You were never nobody, she said gently. You were the person who chose mercy over hate. Again and again. In small moments when nobody was watching. And those moments built this. She gestured at the impossible gathering filling his home. This is your legacy, Dylan. Not the battles you fought. These connections. These lives. As the sun set over the Montana mountains, Dylan looked at the family he'd never known he had. The forest that had grown from seeds he'd planted without realizing. And for the first time since his diagnosis, Dylan Cross didn't want to die alone. He wanted to live long enough to understand what his life had actually meant. The pain hit Dylan hard the next morning. He tried to hide it, tried to get out of bed like everything was normal, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. The cancer was spreading faster now, eating through his body like wildfire. River found him first, still in bed at 9 in the morning. The young dragon's eyes went wide with worry. Brennan. Morgan. Something's wrong. Within minutes, Dr. Patricia was at his bedside, checking his vitals with practiced efficiency. She didn't say anything, but Dylan could read it in her face. The end was coming sooner than the doctors had predicted. Maybe today. Maybe tomorrow. Not much longer. I don't want to do this in bed, Dylan said through gritted teeth. Get me to the couch. I want to see everyone. They moved him carefully. Jackson and Derek supported his weight while Morgan cleared a path. They settled him on the couch with blankets and pillows, and within an hour, everyone had gathered again. The cabin was packed, people sitting on floors, standing in doorways, spilling out onto the porch. Dylan looked at all of them and made a decision. I need to tell you something. All of you. About who I really was during the war. Dylan, you don't have to, Natalie started. Yes, I do. His voice was firm despite the pain. You've all told me these stories about how I saved you, how I changed your lives. But you need to know the whole truth. I wasn't a hero. I killed people. A lot of people. The room went quiet. I followed orders that I knew were wrong, Dylan continued, his voice raw. I bombed civilian areas because command said there were military targets. I watched friends torture prisoners for information. I shot down enemy ships knowing there were kids barely old enough to fly inside them. He looked at Thane. I shot down dozens before I ran out of ammunition on you. Thane nodded slowly but said nothing. I came home with blood on my hands, Dylan said. I've had nightmares for 20 years about the faces of people I killed. Some of them were combatants. Some of them weren't. I did things in that war that I can never take back, can never apologize for, can never make right. Ruth moved closer, her cane tapping on the floor. Do you think we don't know that? Do you think any of us came here believing you were some perfect hero? I'm not. We know you're not, Jackson interrupted. I served too, Dylan. I know what war makes people do. I know the choices that seem impossible until you're standing there making them. Dr. Patricia spoke up. I treated wounded on both sides during the war. I saw what soldiers did to each other. The cruelty. The fear. The impossible decisions. She paused. But I also saw moments of mercy. Moments when soldiers remembered they were human beings, not just weapons. Those moments mattered more because of how rare they were. Thane stepped forward. You think I don't know you killed my comrades? I killed yours too. War is horror. We were all part of that horror. But you chose, in small moments, to be something else. That's what matters to me. Brennan's deep voice rumbled through the room. Mama knew everything about you, Sergeant Cross. She didn't just track down the people you saved. She read your military file. She knew your combat record. She knew about the villages bombed, the ships destroyed, all of it. Dylan looked up, shocked. She told us about it before she died, Morgan added. She said we needed to know the complete truth. That you weren't a saint. You were a soldier who did terrible things in a terrible war. But you were also the soldier who chose mercy when mercy was the hardest choice. Casey continued. She said that's what made it meaningful. If you'd been perfect, if you'd never done anything wrong, then showing her kindness would have been easy. But you had blood on your hands, hate in your heart, every reason to pull that trigger. And you didn't. River moved to Dylan's side. Mama said warriors carry darkness. It's the price of war. But some warriors also carry light. You carried both. You don't get credit for the light unless you acknowledge the darkness. Derek, Ruth's son, spoke up. I teach history now. I teach kids about the war. I don't lie to them. I tell them it was brutal and ugly and that good people did horrible things because war makes monsters of us all. But I also tell them about the moments when people chose differently. When they broke through the hate and remembered their humanity. Those moments are the foundation of peace, Natalie said firmly. Not the battles. Not the victories. The moments when enemies chose to see each other as people. That's how wars end. That's how peace begins. Dylan felt tears streaming down his face. I don't deserve this. I don't deserve all of you here treating me like I'm someone special. You're right, Jackson said bluntly. You don't deserve it. None of us deserve the grace we've been given. But that's what grace is. It's not about deserving. It's about choosing to give it anyway, the same way you chose to give it to others. A young Drakari named Quinn, one of Thane's former students, spoke up shyly. Commander Thane tells us a story in training. About the human pilot who spared him. He says that mercy is the hardest choice a warrior can make because it goes against every instinct, every training, every order. He says the measure of a warrior isn't how well they fight. It's whether they remember they're more than just a weapon. Thane nodded. I tell them that story because I need them to understand. Peace isn't maintained by the best fighters. It's maintained by warriors who know when not to fight. Dylan looked at Brennan. Your mother, she really knew everything. Everything, Brennan confirmed. And she said something else. She said you probably carried guilt that was eating you alive. That warriors always remember their failures more than their successes. She wanted us to tell you something specific. Morgan pulled out a letter. She wrote this for you. She made us promise would only give it to you when you were ready to hear it. Dylan's hands shook as he took the letter. The handwriting was shaky, clearly written by someone very sick, but the words were clear. Dear Sergeant Cross. You don't know me, but you saved my life. I spent years looking for you, not just to say thank you, but to tell you something important. I killed 17 humans during the war. 17 that I know of. Maybe more. Their faces haunt me. I see them when I sleep. I know you see faces too. We all do. Those of us who survived. But here's what I learned. The dead can't be brought back. The past can't be changed. But the future can be shaped. Every day I chose to build instead of destroy, I honored the lives I took. Every student I taught to choose peace, I balanced the scale just a little. Not enough. Never enough. But something. You gave me the chance to make that something. Now my children will make something more. And the children they teach will make something more. The ripples go outward forever. That's what warriors leave behind. Not just the destruction. Also the seeds of what comes next. You planted seeds. Some of them grew into my children. Into the lives you saved. Into the peace we're building. The darkness is real. But so is the light. Thank you for letting me be part of your light. Rachel. The room was silent except for the sound of Dylan crying. River pressed close. Mama wanted you to know you're forgiven. Not because you earned it. But because she chose to forgive you. The same way you chose to save her. Patricia checked Dylan's pulse. She looked at Brennan and shook her head slightly. Not much time left. Brennan knelt beside the couch. It's time, Sergeant. The final flight. We take you to the sky. You see what Mama saw. You understand what she learned up there. Dylan looked around at all these faces. All these lives. All these impossible connections built from moments of mercy in the middle of horror. There's one more thing, he said weakly. My daughter. Kelly. We haven't spoken in 15 years. I was a terrible father. Too broken from the war. Too angry. Too distant. She's probably still in Chicago. Someone needs to tell her I finally understood. That the war doesn't define us. That I'm sorry I forgot that when I came home. Natalie squeezed his hand. She's on her way, Dylan. I called her 2 days ago. She's been driving straight through. She'll be here soon. I won't make it. Then we'll give her Rachel's letter. We'll tell her everything. We'll make sure she knows. Dylan closed his eyes, exhausted. Okay. Take me flying. Show me what Rachel saw. Dawn came cold and clear over the Montana mountains. Dylan could barely feel his body anymore. The pain had faded into a strange numbness, like he was already half gone from the world. But his mind was clear. Crystal clear in a way it hadn't been in months. The 4 dragon siblings stood in the yard, stretching their wings in preparation. The gathered witnesses formed a circle, humans and aliens together, watching in silence. Brennan approached the porch where Dylan lay wrapped in blankets. Are you ready, Sergeant? As ready as I'll ever be. Dylan's voice was barely a whisper. They lifted him so gently. Morgan and Casey supported his legs while Brennan cradled his upper body. River flew close, creating a warm pocket of air around Dylan with careful wing beats. The cold mountain air would have killed him in seconds without that protection. We're going up now, Brennan said softly. Don't be afraid. Dylan wasn't afraid. For the first time in 20 years, he felt something like peace. They rose slowly. The gathered people below grew smaller. Dylan could see them all standing together, this impossible family he'd never known he had. Ruth was holding her great-grandchildren. Jackson and Derek stood with arms around each other's shoulders. Thane's wings were spread in a Drakari gesture of respect. Dr. Patricia was crying. Natalie was waving. Up. Higher. Through the clouds. And then Dylan saw it. The world spread out below him like a living map. The sun was just cresting the horizon, spilling gold across the landscape. He could see the mountains, the forests, the small towns scattered across Montana. In the distance, the curve of the earth itself. But what struck him wasn't the beauty. It was how small everything looked. The borders he'd fought to defend were invisible from up here. The bases where he'd trained, the memorials to fallen soldiers, the cities that had been bombed and rebuilt, all of it looked tiny. Fragile. Precious. This is what Mama saw, River said, flying close. After you saved her. When her wing healed enough to fly again. She came up here and everything looked different. Brennan's deep voice rumbled through Dylan's chest. She said the war looked stupid from up here. All that hate, all that killing, all those years of making each other suffer, and for what? Lines on a map that you couldn't even see from the sky. Morgan pointed toward the horizon. You see those lights? That's New Denver Colony. Humans and Drakari living together. Sharing resources. Raising families. That started because Mama believed it was possible. She believed it because you showed her it was possible. Dylan's eyes blurred with tears. From up here, he could see the passenger ships moving between Earth and the orbital stations. Trade vessels. Transport craft. No warships. No battle formations. Just people going about their lives in peace. How many people down there? Dylan whispered. On Earth? 9 billion humans. 2 billion Drakari immigrants. 500 million Centauri. Millions of other species, Casey answered. All living together because enough people chose peace over hate. I didn't do that. I just saved one dragon. You saved the dragon who convinced others it was possible, Brennan corrected gently. Mima testified before the Galactic Council. She showed them her scars. She told them about the human Marine who chose mercy. She made them believe that if one soldier could choose differently, maybe all of us could. River moved closer, those young eyes shining. You started something, Sergeant Cross. A ripple. It spread out and out and out. Every person you saved started more ripples. Every act of kindness created more kindness. It's still spreading. It'll keep spreading long after you're gone. Dylan thought about Rachel. The Dragon Scout bleeding out in a collapsed bunker. The choice he'd made without thinking. The future he'd given her without knowing. I wish I could have met her, he said softly. Your mother. You did, Brennan said. In that bunker. In the worst moment of her life. You met her and you chose to see her. That's all she ever wanted to tell you. Thank you for seeing me when no one else would. They flew in silence for a while. Dylan watched the sun climb higher, watched the world wake up below. He saw a school where human and alien children were arriving for class. He saw a hospital with 6 different species medical symbols on the roof. He saw a park where families of all kinds were gathering for morning exercise. I killed so many, Dylan whispered. Did so many terrible things. We know, Morgan said quietly. Mama knew too. But she said something important. She said warriors don't get to choose whether they carry darkness. War gives them that whether they want it or not. But they do get to choose whether they also carry light. You carried both, Sergeant. That's what made you human. Casey added, the darkness is real. Mama never denied that. But she said the light is real too. And in the end, the light lasted longer. Your moments of mercy outlived your moments of violence. That's what matters. Dylan felt his breathing getting harder. His chest was tight. The pain was coming back, sharp and insistent. I think it's time, he gasped. Not yet, River said urgently. One more thing. Look east. Dylan turned his head. In the distance, he could see a car on the highway, driving fast toward his cabin. Even from up here, he somehow knew. Kelly, he breathed. She's coming, Brennan confirmed. She got Mama's letter yesterday. Read it 3 times. Then got in her car and started driving. She'll be at your cabin in 30 minutes. I won't make it 30 minutes. Then we land now. Fast. We get you back so you can see her. They descended quickly, but carefully. The ground rushed up. Dylan could see everyone scattering to make room. They landed in the yard with a thump that Dylan barely felt. Patricia was there instantly, checking his pulse. His fading fast. The car, Dylan wheezed. How far? Natalie had binoculars. 10 minutes. Maybe less. She's speeding. They carried Dylan inside, laid him on the couch. Everyone crowded around, but left space, knowing what was coming. Dylan's vision was tunneling. He could hear his heartbeat slowing. But he held on. Stubborn Marine habit. He'd survived 40 years of war and 20 years of guilt. He could survive 10 more minutes. 7 minutes. 6. 5. Tires on gravel. A car door slamming. Running footsteps. Dad. Kelly burst through the door. She looked older than Dylan remembered. Tired. But her eyes were the same eyes he'd seen as a child. She dropped to her knees beside the couch. Dad, I'm here. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I stayed away so long. Dylan smiled. It took all his strength, but he smiled. Not your fault. I was the one who left. Even when I came home, I left. I read the letter. From Rachel. The dragon you saved. Kelly was crying. Dad, I never knew. You never told me about any of this. Didn't think it mattered. It matters. It all matters. She grabbed his hand. You mattered. You still matter. Dylan looked past her at the crowd filling his cabin. All these lives. All these connections. All these ripples spreading outward from choices he'd made without thinking. Tell your kids, he whispered. Tell them their grandfather wasn't perfect. Did bad things. But also tried to be good when he could. Tell them that's enough. That's all any of us can do. Kelly nodded, tears streaming. I will. I promise. Brennan moved closer. Sergeant Cross. Mama wanted us to tell you one more thing. She said to tell you that the sky belongs to everyone now. No more wars over who owns the stars. Just people sharing the universe together. You helped make that possible. River pressed against Dylan's side. Thank you for saving our mama. Thank you for giving us a future. Dylan looked around one last time. At Kelly. At the 4 dragon siblings. At all the faces of people whose lives had touched his in ways he'd never understood. "I see it now," he whispered. "I see what I was too close to see before. The forest. Not just the trees. The whole forest." His breathing slowed. Patricia checked his pulse one last time and shook her head gently. "Dad." Kelly's voice was breaking. "It's okay, sweetheart. I'm okay. I'm not alone. I'm not dying alone." And with those words, surrounded by family he'd earned through small acts of mercy, Sergeant Dylan Cross closed his eyes and let go. The room was silent except for quiet crying. Then Brennan began to sing. A deep, rumbling Drakari death song. Morgan, Casey, and River joined in. The harmonies filled the cabin, filled the mountain valley, rose up toward the sky where Dylan had just flown. The humans didn't know the words, but they hummed along. Species that had been enemies, standing together, honoring a warrior who'd carried both darkness and light. 10 years later, the cabin had become a memorial site. Volunteers from 12 different species maintained it, keeping Dylan's story alive. Kelly came every year on the anniversary. She brought her children, told them about their grandfather, about the dragon he'd saved, about the ripples of mercy that still spread outward. The 4 dragon siblings returned annually too. Brennan was a peace negotiator now, working on trade agreements between distant colonies. Morgan ran a hospital that treated patients regardless of species or ability to pay. Casey was a judge specializing in interspecies law. River taught history at the integration school their mother had founded. They stood together at Dylan's grave marker, reading the words carved in stone. Sergeant Dylan Cross. He chose mercy when war demanded cruelty. And below, added later in both human and Drakari script. 1 life saved. 1,000 lives changed. This is how peace is built. River, now an adult, addressed the crowd of visitors. Students, families, veterans from both sides of the old war. "People ask what made Sergeant Cross special," River said. "The answer is simple. He didn't think he was special. He just tried to be decent when it was hard. He saw people when everyone else saw enemies. And he never knew how much those small choices mattered." A young human student raised her hand. "What's the most important thing we should learn from his story?" River smiled, remembering the old warrior who'd given their mother a future. That you don't have to save the whole world. You just have to save the person in front of you. Do that enough times, make enough small choices toward kindness instead of hate, and the world saves itself. The memory flames around the memorial pulsed softly in the wind, carrying Dylan's story forward into a future he'd helped create. A future where the sky belonged to everyone.